Hi there, guys. Hi there, guys. So the other day we talked about stroke, and then how that influenced form a little bit. Form is a really big topic, so there's no way I'd be able to cover like the entirety of form. You just basically look at everything in your everyday environment and start to study its forms behind it. We're going to understand a little bit more about form as we go here into measure today. So we did form the previous day, and now we're going to go into measure. I'll turn this into a playlist so that you have it in order. All right. So form, use stroke to help you understand form, and how you're going to be doing it, and also get those. You also use stroke to help you with the most difficult indicating parts of a form, like the parts that turn away from the camera that are, a lot more squashed and stretched and pinched and that sort of thing. You can only really use stroke language to help you create it, because if you're going in and you're saying like, oh, here's a direct exact geometric shape, it's not gonna work as fluently. So stroke merges into form, merges into measurement. So let's get to measurement here. So last time we did that cup with biscuits in it, which was, yeah, that's fine, but uh, I wasn't measuring, and so everything's really far off and sort of like cats and dogs, just sort of spanning off wherever it wants, whenever it wants, and no one cares, right? So measurement is the way to control that. And you have all these moving parts like stroke and form and measurement. And essentially, you want to be using all these together. And using them all together is a force thing. So if you don't know how to use them all together, you it's okay. Just take some time. Um, you're probably not going to be fast enough either. So, like, to just go through each one and say, like, oh, this is the actual ideas of stroke. Oh, this is the actual ideas of form. Oh, now I'm going to do measurement. Like, you're not going to be flitting back and forth between these just yet. And you're probably not going to be able to combine them just yet. So, which requires this so that things don't scatter and do weird stuff. So just keep that in mind as I'm talking about measurement here. You want to be able to look at things that are sort of drifting and doing like weird things all the time. Like as soon as you don't look at one part, another part's gonna like do a weird thing. Okay, so they're gonna be like moving around like little bugs in a petri dish, and it's gonna be weird. And you're gonna have to start thinking about things of like, oh, okay, but then this is gonna come around here, which does this, and then that goes around here and does that, because you're going to be trying to control and handle things simultaneously, which is really annoying and kind of difficult. But form can help you as well. So your strokes can help you and your forms can help you, because you're like, oh, but that's part of a spherical form, and then this is part of a triangular form, which does this. And so you can be like, ah, cool, yeah, now I've got my ways to use form and stroke to kind of memorize where things are in your head, so that when you're doing measurement, it's that little bit more intuitive, a little bit more intuitive. And we're going to get into that. Okay, so yeah, and yeah. Okay, so with measurement, um, probably some of the main principles is triangulation. I'll just say the ones that I use. Triangulation and ratios. Ratios. Ratios and angles. So there's also, some people call it sight size. So we'll just look at these kind of four techniques, and I probably have like another technique, which is probably deconstruction and form analysis and stuff. So we'll take a look at that too. Let's just say other. It shouldn't have so much stabilization. That's just making it really tricky. All right. So, mm, so with triangulation, we're gonna take a look at that on a picture. All right. So I picked something here that is, mm, how should we say it? It doesn't have facial features, so it's kind of a little bit like drawing that kind of inanimate art where it's not the features of things that you're going to be drawing all the time, but it's also useful in terms of composition. This is a mid-wide shot, which is a shot you will be using potentially, um, so long as you're not afraid of drawing legs and hips. And yeah, so okay, we can use that layout. And it doesn't have too many details. Here, I picked this one because I'm pretty sure that this is going to get very drifty. So if you were to start and just be like, oh, I'm drawing someone from behind and then this and then whatever, I'm going to add a little stabilization. If you're going to be drawing some whatever figure, uh, and you're like, oh, the hand up here and here, there's a lot of room here for you to muck up the measurements because it's not super explicit what's going on. It's not super familiar, and so people will probably get that a little bit off. They'll get it a little bit wrong. So I figure this is maybe a better way. Whoa, wrong thing to change. Okay, there we go. So, all right, let's get started on some measurement techniques here. Well, so triangulation. So what is triangulation? Essentially, what we're doing is we're picking certain points on the figure that are going to be useful, little landmarks, like top of the shoulder here, bottom of the hands, apex of the head, um, uh, hmm, maybe even this the shirt line and that line, maybe the bottom of the pants there. Um, there's a very obvious part of like the center line that you can use and just say like what's off the center line. So she's tilted, which can help you understand things. But triangulation, let's not do that on the canvas. You can, if you're practicing triangulation, you can start by practicing it on the actual figure, on the actual canvas if you want. I don't think that's like vicious copying or something. Like you don't have to worry too much about that, because you're just getting angles, right? But I also think that you should take some time to actually do this off the canvas as well. Not necessarily memorizing from this, but just kind of making sure you get some practice controlling it yourself. So whatever triangles you want to make, it doesn't really matter, but essentially you just want to start to understand things in relationship to each other. Because if you're not understanding them in relationship to each other, then you're not understanding what's happening in the piece. So in this piece, we obviously have like a center line, right? We have a center line, and deviating from that center line, we have like something of a hand doing something here, which then comes down at this kind of angle doing something here. Um, the head, let's not do the head. Like whenever you come up against a thing, you're like, I can't remember how that's done. You just, okay, so if we come out from the center line from this thing, we can get to like a shoulder. And then if we come down, sort of, it's almost straight to there, and there. And from the peak, it sort of comes in into the waist or something, and then it comes out, da da da, and then come in and out, whatever. Maybe this isn't the best way to triangulate, but you just use lines to describe the form, rather than da da da, and you just triangulate things like, okay, so the shoulder and the hip, what angle are they at? Yeah, that's kind of like at the right angle. What about the top of the hip, waist, and down to the hand? That's off because it should be like a steeper decline to where the hand is, right? Um, and then this is okay, good. So we found an error in the angle that we created between this and this that was here. It was currently here and then kind of changed it to be a line like this. But now what you see is this transition from here to here has made it difficult, where all of a sudden you're now starting to have to ask a lot of questions like, is this entire picture too wide? Is it not communicating the right things? Has changing this line changed every other line? Because this, all of a sudden, by doing this, this lengthens the piece. So then all these other things are out of ratio now. They're out of whack. This is the thing that you're going to struggle with doing all of these methods. Triangles, ratios, angles, side size, and other. Maybe not with this one because this is about actually fixing that. So when you're learning measurement, don't think of it like triangulation or ratios or angles done perfectly is going to solve the problem. Because if you think that measurement is actually about getting your measurements accurate, you're wrong. So see this difference, this small difference that we did in a correction? This is going to be natural. So when you have strokes and stroke lengths or whatever, and you're doing like this, it's very natural, even using the same muscle, to have a variation in line, uh, because that's the biomechanics of the muscle that you're using. If you're just generally doing something, you can get pretty accurate, sort of pretty accurate lines, but you'll notice here there's still an error ratio here. And what is this error ratio here? It's very similar to that idea. Like if I was just doing it very loose or something like that, I'd get pretty much the same error ratio. So don't freak out, because this error ratio, it's not bad. What it does is it creates an idea of compounding errors. So when you do get an error like this, and it starts to tell you, hey, all these other points are going to be off now, where you've triangulated things, you've triangulated some helpful angles, and now all those are angles you might as well throw them out because you've mucked up. Well, when you have this and you have that problem, that's kind of a good thing. And maybe I'll describe later why. Uh, but it's a good thing, um, because you're facing the actual problem of measurement. So when you are measuring, you are facing off against this. You're not facing off against this or any specific thing about how her angles work. That doesn't matter. What you're working against is the compound errors that are going to accrue. Okay? So let's still use this measurement. It's still kind of all right. See, what I would do is I would just look at this and then I would use an overall vision of the thing, but that's kind of going into this and into this. So let's not do that. So by getting angles between different things, you can make double checks and you can check things, but you'll eventually reach a point where something mucks up. That's okay. Just chill with that. Let that exist like that for now. Don't freak out. There's no perfect way to measure every single thing so that no thing is off. And if there is, it's probably not even good for you. So don't worry about it because it's just like copying. If you get desperate to have something be perfect, it's kind of like copying. It means that you no longer have room for like nuance, and you always want room for nuance. The point here is that we're developing an idea of measurement. Maybe I can make that triangulation thing smaller so that we have like an image of it. Let's do that actually. Boom, and then uh, cut, paste, remove all that. Make this just so we have a triangulation thing, little symbol. Cool. Cool. All right, so we want to maintain as much nuance when we're measuring, which was always my consideration, or is my consideration when I think about measure. And, we did this, we found an error, cool. You could just do multiple versions of it, and until you get one that doesn't have an error, that's totally fine too. But that's going to take you speed, and it's going to take you a bit of fitness as well to solve. You could also do something where you're literally thinking about it really hard and you're sitting on the problem about what thing you got wrong, why you got it wrong in this specific instance, and that would require force to do. So some people are going to be naturally more forceful, others are going to be more speedy, others are going to be more like just workhorse it through with fitness. That's totally fine. So whatever your natural sort of strength is, you can use that if you want to, but it's going to be very unpleasant. So let's just stop. Say that's triangulation, where we're getting those kinds of things and just doing that. Like you can, oh, okay, so let's get to ratios now. So with ratios, we just want to understand the difference between, say, top, bottom, middle, shoulders, um, pant line, um, like arm length, like that's to the elbow, and then to the whatever fingertips or something. So we're just getting ratios here. So uh, you might look at that and say, okay, we've got a ratio that's kind of like this, and then kind of like this, where we've got like this little slither on the outside of like a main thing, and we've got like one of those kind of ratios for like the hip. And then lower, we've got probably, is that almost a half? It's almost like a half. So it's like that is how like wide the knees are. And if we take that ratio of this hip length and we extend it down, it's kind of around where the knees are. So we take take this ratio and then we say, oh, that ratio coming down here, probably going to be where the knees are anyway. So you take things that are going to be familiar measurements and you start to break down what ratios are of the body, and let's do the upper body as well. So that is about the same size as the very top of the shoulders, but this, if we go here, it's about 2 lengths, so we can just go to there and to there, and that's where we'd have like shoulder line, which would come across like that length. And this can be really helpful in fixing issues with this triangulation method. And what you can do here is you can actually use your pencil. So you can use your pencil, and as you're doing these kind of ratios, instead of using halves and quarters and thirds and stuff, you can just use your pencil and be like, to get like a little bit more precise, so that you can basically adjust it millimeter by millimeter what ratios you want where. All right, so doing this is going to be good because it's going to give you information, but that information isn't necessarily going to be like the most, like it's not directly going to go to the drawing. It's just going to give you like a line and a line and a line, and maybe what you want to do is you might put like your triangulation across it and check it. You could do that, and that's what a lot of people do. They do triangulation, partly to get angles of things, like, oh, this is a thing like this. Anyways, we're going on to angles, so I'll shut up about that. So ratios had this like thing, right? And then this thing, and then this thing, and then like that. Like you're just getting your ratios and stuff, whatever. Okay, so and then we've got angles. So angles are just important angles in the piece. So for example, this here is an important angle. Well, and you want to both practice like not doing it on it. So there's this angle like here doing this, and even on her arm there's like an angle where it comes out and it kind of comes down at that angle, and then her forearm sort of comes in at it's pretty steep, but then there's like another angle that comes like that angle, and her thighs kind of come across at this angle, which is very similar to her actual hip structure that come at that angle too. Her torso is kind of like coming straight up on the left hand side. The hand angle is kind of like this angle, and like the forearm of that hand, and then the finger angle is like that, and the thumb angle is like that. So getting these angles, probably the easiest way to do this is actually with stroke. So you just figure out what actual stroke angle it is and what stroke combination it is. And once you have that stroke combination in your muscle memory, you can say like, oh, that's kind of this thing, that's kind of that thing, that's kind of this one, that's kind of that one. And you can also use this angle study to start being like, what would I do with my stroke language here? Like, okay, so they've got this kind of angle, right? This kind of angle coming into the shoulder, which then drops down, and then it comes out a little bit, and then it comes down. We have like an angle that comes through here, and then it sweeps before it comes down, and then it kinks out. And so you can use angles, or just the angles, along with stroke and memory, to just kind of get more points of information. So you might have ratios that you could check these up against and like, oh yeah, I got those ratios right, cool. You might even have some triangulation that's like, oh, but this part has to be relevantly to this part, and this part has to tilt to this part, or whatever. So you'll be using triangulation ratios, angles, and you can use stroke in these angles. All right, so let's take a selection of this thingy so that we have that, and then shrink it. So have something for angles. I know it's not going to be very organized, whatever. All right. So you do that sort of stuff with angles, but you're going to get compounding errors with that as well. So the compounding errors are just going to be that when you do these angles, there's eventually going to be short points. Like points are going to be way too short or way too long, and or maybe like way too wide, and it's just going to be different than what you wanted it to be. But the angles will be right. And what you might be noticing here is that if you get the ratios right, the angles might be wrong. If you get the triangulation right, the ratios might be wrong. If you get like it's kind of a rock scissors paper thing where they kind of start fighting against each other, and you really want to pay attention to this as you're studying it, because it's going to take you like a week or longer to just sit with it, start to see the parts move, start to see them change, start to see them fight with you. That's what you want. That's where we get to something that's called sight size. So sight size is literally looking at the thing and then saying, oh, okay, here is like the form's size. And okay, I look at this thing and here's the form's size. All right, but and it kind of comes around there and what and comes around there, and maybe this comes in through here, and then oh, there's like a trapezoid thing that oh, it's about this size, and this is practicing by eye. And sight, oh, okay, let's also do this one. Where we've got this connecting into this, and it comes over, and it's like a blocky shape here, bop, that connects up here. So this is sight size, where essentially you're taking, this isn't even form, because form should be three-dimensional, but you can probably do it three-dimensionally if you wanted with sight size. But you just get the basic blocking in of the figure down from your eye to be like, okay, that seems accurate. Like if I look to the left and I look at the head and then I look to the body and then I see that thing and then I look to that part and I look to that thing. See here, I'd immediately say those are different. So this should be smaller probably. Uh, but because of the width or whatever, maybe that's right. So then these hips have to just be extended and longer. So whatever. Um, so you would do your sight size sort of thing to get whatever your rough approximation with your eyes is. And people can get really accurate with this, just looking at a thing and then applying paint down. But I would just say that to practice sight size, just start with like little forms, or You can also do it with strokes, but this is where we're getting into this one. Okay, so if I take this, and we make this smaller. Oh, let's get it way smaller. Okay. All right. So when it comes to other, what I would say is it's a combination of everything. So your triangulation is you look at like this part to 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 interesting features. You're like, ah, boom, 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 ba, 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 ba. It's going to be useful. And then with, say, ratios, you say like, oh, that's about halfway down the form line. This is, um, this coming to here, coming to here, coming to here. That I'm breaking this length into thirds. Is there like a thirds line that comes down here? Yeah, there kind of is. Like that's on a third. The inside of the knees on a third. This one's out here. This hip is kind of like outside that thing. You'll be making these kind of observations with your eyes. So that's a combination of triangulation and ratio. And then you might be saying something like, oh, but I want to see what the angles are. So then you might use some sight size. You might say, okay, I just want to block in this idea of this torso, right? And then with that idea, I'm gonna select some actual angles. So the angle of her torso and the angle of her hips, and you can get that kind of pinch, and then you say like, oh, but then it's kind of got this thing that does this and comes down, and it just misses that little gap in the arm. So you're like, oh, okay, I wanted to capture that part. So now I have that part, and the angle of the forearm, it keeps coming down while her hips, you know, meet it all the way down. And you can start to break down each aspect like this. So switching between each one. And what I would generally do is I would recommend that you do it with mainly two ideas. So stroke and form are probably going to be the two biggest simplifiers here, because essentially, if you break it down, she has spherical head, she has a kind of a lopsided kind of position here because her shoulder's up, like her shoulder blade is like, you know, elevated. Um, and this one is down in comparison. So this shoulder blade is up, this one's located down. There's a kind of a nice little taper that comes through. And it's like, okay, cool. Get that form, and then okay, so whenever you come up against like a void of where you feel like you're drawing into a void, you want to try and figure out what ways you can make it not just you randomly picking a thing. And here I can see there's this curved line around like her glutes that do this. And so I'm going to use that with my stroke to kind of create that three-dimensionality to it, so that I gain that extra little bit of perspective, that little cheat. And if I do something like this, I can see that her her back is actually inside here, and then it comes over itself like this. So there's actually this rhythm line um, that comes under and through and then over, which helps me understand like the more indicating nature of the form. So I got these kind of rhythm lines on the form using stroke, allowing me to then say like relative to this rhythm line, I can now take something here with that part of the form, which then comes off here, which now gives me this kind of teardrop shape, which is part of the actual form here, where there's this teardrop shape. And then there's this weird leafy shape here, which comes up and then it kinks in. If you understand anything about anatomy, this little kink is because the iliac crest was here, and essentially it's going in now into the not lat muscles, that the side abs, the oblique muscles. So it's going from the top of the iliac crest. Like if she was forward, the iliac crest would be here because hips and stuff. Which comes in, and then there's like a hip bone. So this is the meeting of the iliac crest down to the top, to the very edge of the femur. So the femur is here, okay, and then it comes in. So femur is getting touched there, and then it's moving in. Anyways, so you can make little adjustments based on some anatomy understandings. Like, oh, that needs to be there for that reason, sort of thing. Those little adjustments can also be part of other. But I'm sight sizing all the time. So I'm going back, I'm going forth, going back and forth. And then I'm just making incremental things where I've got strokes that give me a reference. Like even this one, I've got like timing on this stroke, which is telling me what I'm doing. And so ratios, you can just pick those, you can put those and pen those on strokes. Then when you've got like this little main form here, you can say like, okay, and then I want like maybe I'm going to use like a flowy little kind of form to like capture some of the nature of that arm. And then I'm going to like flick out like it does, and then come down like it does. And then, there's a wrapping around of this elbow, which then causes that slight protrusion, which then comes down close to the hips until it reaches a point where we get to our thumb, which then has this, we've got the plane of the hand, and that does that. And we've got like the fingertips, which then come across. And we've got the thumb, which is the main silhouette in that hand. Well, see, most of the things that I'm saying, they're not important. Where I'm saying like, oh, the thumb and the silhouette, like that's just me talking through like little indicators, but they're not important. Like if you're thinking like, oh, but I don't understand any of those things, just use whatever knowledge is available to you. It doesn't matter. It's not going to matter. It's not going to matter at all what piece of information you use. It doesn't matter. And see, you'll just go through something like that, and then you will use your measurements. Like you just briefly dip in and dip out and check angles. So angle of like a shirt line. Okay, cool. And then it sort of whips around like this. Okay. Well, there's this sort of light angle that does this. Okay. And then our sight line, our horizon line's directly here. So it makes sense that everything's sort of underneath the camera. So it's about going to be level, but this is going to be up. Let's take some of the forms of this hair, because this is going to really describe her. So this one comes around like this, and then the stroke language sort of pulls out this way, and then it comes in, but then it whips back around, and then it pulls under like this, and then it doesn't matter so much until we get to like here, where it comes up, and then it waves like this. Just like a wavy thing. And then it comes up and over again. So it's got these wavy patterns. You could start to do the same thing with like shadow forms if you want, but yeah, I'd probably do that with a paintbrush, to be honest, to get shadows in. Because it doesn't matter how you do it. You can just block shadows in and move them around. They're not that important. All right. I mean, they are really important, but you can be very fudgy initially with them. So there's this, and yeah, so we've got like this kind of like hair thing, like this, all this hair, and her arm. We want to show that arm, and there's kind of like a shadow shape here of that arm, and it sort of sweeps down around here, and then she has like a thing that goes across here, and like a finger comes down and around, and a thumb. And now I'm not even doing measuring. I'm just kind of thinking of like design idea, the design form. This thing, her legs going forward, that comes down. There's going to be some sort of pinch, and then off here, and there's like this wrapping around of the thigh at the top part, and then this sort of wider leg that comes down there. And it's a little bit lower, and then it's sort of coming off. So you'll get a basis of your measurements and ideas from that, and then that should help you configure all these things mentally all at once. So using sight size, using angles, using ratios, using triangulation, but using all of those things lightly, and instead mostly focusing on the stroke and the form. So the form, you're like, oh yeah, that's the form roughly. This is the stroke roughly, which comes through and around and down and across and up and out and down and across. Like this is where you start to see why I might do things like really wobbly, because if you're just kind of like very loosely sort of adjusting and understanding the form, you can be like, oh, okay, cool, I'll do this, and then like design wise we'll just do this, and this comes up and off and around, and you might even think of like, oh, I can do this like simpler or easier, rather than doing the reference form the way that the reference form's done it, where it's not exactly clear. I can do something maybe different, like maybe rotate her hips out more this way, so that this is like this and this is a bit more exaggerated, And so when we do get this outer thing that gets that weird teardrop shape thing, and we get this curve of this leg, we can like do something more with that. And this one, yeah, it comes in, but we want this to kind of maybe push forward a little more. And this, I'm going to decide to maybe just round that off like that. And this comes through like this, just to show a little bit more the angularity or the way that she's moving. So we've got this curve, right? This curve that comes up and under and over. And so maybe I want this shoulder maybe a bit higher to just kind of show that curve a bit more. And this isn't necessary. This is just me saying, okay, if you are going to be making adjustments, then you can make adjustments that kind of like help the idea flow more. So this, 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 simplifications, boom, and like the simplifications along this and along this and along the underside of this and along the underside of like some things here. And there's probably like some ways we can simplify underneath here. Right, and then pull this across the waist belt and a seam, and then like some little indicating angles. Um, uh, but and with this arm, like I think that arm is really stiff, and so when something's really stiff and kind of awkwardly positioned, you also want to think about how the reference itself for having something so stiffly positioned or weirdly positioned. You think, well, what's kind of the use of even capturing that accurately? Is there a use? And so, meh, I don't really think so. So what I like is this idea of there's a curve along this part of the arm, and then maybe what I like about this arm is that there's an underneath kind of like sweep of things. So I'll go here, and then I'll make like, yeah, okay, we'll change it up a bit, and then here, like maybe what we want is a kind of nervous sort of clenching of her arms, where she's kind of like nervously fidgeting, because that makes it a little bit more whatever. I don't know. That, and then this comes out. Wow, her hand is, it kind of looks really long in this. Maybe I'll bring it out a little bit more. Whatever. We just make that a little steeper. That there, and then this across here, and like this. Yeah, maybe that's enough to represent this sort of feel of it. This one's representing as a shadow, so let's just remove that. Maybe just out a bit more. And this curve should be the other way. It's not screwing with things. And then what you do is you go into ideation of like, what's wrong with this? What don't I like about it? What's kind of weird and holding this back? Um, where you can basically save it from any sort of issues it has and kind of work that out. So here we've kind of got like a leg moving forward and we've got a leg sort of moving back, um, back, and got this sort of thing, and then comes in, that comes, I don't know, whatever. So your measurement shouldn't even necessarily be an exact one-to-one because you've got compounding errors that are going to be happening anyway. The idea of simplifying the form or recreating the form in the kind of light that you want it is also something that you want to be considering doing. And so we can go into like Blender and we can start to like just turn those into like tones. I've always found that when you create tones from weird sketch lines, it's actually quite interesting. Um, because your sketch lines they have feeling and emotion to them that's kind of hard to capture with just a raw color. I don't know. I like how sketches can sometimes have this sort of emotional quality that blends into the piece. In well, why should I say piece? The blends into the thing that you're drawing, right? Um, I kind of yeah. So you should have something rhythmic and sweepy because you're using stroke. Um, and because you used form, you should have something that suggests the actual form. And because you used all those measuring techniques, little bits of measuring techniques, you're going to have something that's fairly consistent to the image. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to test this over the image. We're going to see what's going on. But I never really do that once something is like, that's cool enough. Once it's cool enough, like, doesn't matter if it's measured or not. It's like, yeah, who cares? Um, all right, so maybe I'll just clear everything except this. I don't know. Me being indecisive. I'll take this, and then I'll say copy, paste, and we will remove this, and maybe we'll increase the size of that one. And something about measurement that's cool is you don't always want, oh, come on, there is something on that. What are they talking about? Oh, right, because it's still selected. Okay, cool. All right. Cool thing about measurement is it doesn't have to be the same size. It can just be a ratio, a kind of uh, a look at things. So you could look at this and then you could site size and start tweaking and all that sort of stuff. That's totally fine. You could also look at the piece and think of things that you've forgotten, like features that are more interesting, um, and that kind of thing. I wouldn't typically recommend doing what I'm about to do, which is just literally um, drag this over. But okay, so let's rotate because there's like a little rotation going on. Bah, It's a little bit more rotated in my version because I like it more rotated. And there we go. It's not crazy off because I did want to accentuate certain things. And yeah, that's kind of the angle. I think that's even the size. Did I get the size right? I think actually this, if we increase the size a bit, because it didn't get the size 100%. Mm, yeah, about that size. And obviously just the hand is super rough. Like the hand is just super big on the head. But it's pretty close. And so you can see that by just kind of combining all the things, you can get an idea. And generally, if I was taking this girl for reference for something, I would do it even looser than this because I would just be taking the design forms, the design ideas out of it. And then I could myself create the forms that I want or the strokes that I want because it's just a combination of forms and strokes. And the measurements are really just there to kind of patch different things together. And if you start to understand that what you're patching together, why you're patching that part together, it can help you reduce some of the complexity of those compounding errors. And essentially, if everything is done in an intelligent way, triangulation, ratios, angles, site size, they all add to each other. They all start to work together to help you create the design or the comparison or whatever. And it removes that compounding error problem where everything was getting 5% less accurate with every stroke, with every piece of information, because it's more and more information to deal with. Now you're getting, now you're reducing the information to a design, to an understanding of what this structural thing is, how you work it with your strokes, how you work it with your form, how you work it with the considerations of the certain rhythms that you're putting in there. And that allows you to sort of make everything more fudgeable, more nuanced, um, and indicating things all the time. And that means that, yeah, that allows you to be less less inaccurate simply because the meaning of those measurements is now significant to you. Now they have a purpose, they have a meaning, they have a reason for being there. And you can go from one part of the body to the next and sort of feel your way around the form. And that is essentially what you want to be doing when you're doing measurement is you're juggling and it is very much like juggling all these different components. So in juggling those components and those ideas, just taking a slight bit of them and then using some speed to cross all of them, using maybe a little bit of force sometimes to figure out like some structural issues or whatever, just maintaining a sort of pace and just jogging with it, just like ha, 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 just stay with it, allows you to get something that's reasonable enough. And then you can change it, shift it, whatever. Like obviously this hand needs to be way smaller for this one. Um, but yeah, so that's pretty much it. And so when we're talking about stroke and we're talking about form and we're talking about measurement, hopefully now you understand a little bit more about what I'm saying here. And everything all leads into a method. And there are so many ways to do things. Um, so there's kind of like optimal methods and there's like rough methods. So you could have a rough method to create the thing that you want to create, whatever, it doesn't matter. But I would typically say that you'll never be able to figure out what the optimal method is for a specific thing until you understand the design. If you understand the design, the purpose, the storytelling, all that sort of stuff, then you can actually work on creating the optimal method for doing it. So for example, if you're a manga artist, you're going to want a method, but you're not going to want your method before you've considered your design, and you're not going to want a method before you've got all these features down. Like if you've got stroke, form, measurement, like you've got in your mind just the general sort of ratios and ways things are structured for your characters. You're like, okay, I've got that. I know what kind of forms they're made out of. I know the kind of stroke language I use for each one. Then you can say like, oh, and in this scene, they're going to be doing this, and I want these designs to showcase what I need. And then you develop a method going from the rough methods into optimal methods. And that's generally the way that you want to draw, is you want to get stroke, your form, your measurement done, get into design work, because this, once we're here, we should get into design. I know a lot of people would start rendering from this, but that's a mistake. Don't render until you start figuring out the design. You got to figure out the design. Then you can use a method to render it, to develop it further. And anything that hasn't gone into a method is probably what people would call a sketch. Um, and that's it. Like it's just a rough thing. Every artist is going to be able to do this stroke form measurement thing in their own way. Usually by site size, but some people that like atelier artists and stuff are going to do this ratios and triangulation a lot, um, and and double checking angles a million times and stuff, which is fine if you want to do that more and that's your art style, then that's exactly what you should do. Like if you're precise, like a precise artist that wants to focus on things as precise as possible, especially if it's more realism based, then you want to go into that. If you're doing something that's more capturing the idea of it, then I would say don't. Don't measure that much. You can if you want to develop just keener instincts, but generally what I would say gets you more precise is actually fitness, which is it's kind of weird. It's just like how much effort can you do like running around this piece? Uh, Even on these little minutia, can you run around that piece on these minutia like a lot? Fitness is going to help you figure out all these pseudo tiny measurements that are super important. And so if you want to do that, then you have to just be incredibly fit to get super accurate. You also have to be pretty strong. So force allows you to like add compression to all the moving parts. So like this part is like moving and it's like, I'm going to wiggle out this way and I'm going to wiggle out this way. And you can be like, no, stay in place, stay in place. And your speed is going to help you juggle between like, woo, one thing, the other thing, then the other thing. Because the longer you keep something unattended, the more mischievous it's going to be. Like, so the faster you are dipping back and forth to different ideas, the less mischief these little cats get up to, right? So you don't need as much force if you've got more speed. But if you've got more force, you don't need as much speed. And if you've got enough fitness, you're going to be like winning the battle of attrition over and over and over again, to the point that these guys get worn out and tired and they don't like moving anymore. So, and that's going to be super important for precision. So this is what I'm talking about. I'm talking about stroke helping form and form helping measurement, and you're using all these guys to work together to help you understand things so that you can get, even the design is working back to help you get your figure and your setup and your sketch, and you're starting to make considerations about why you're doing something, what it's for, where it's going, what you're going to use this for. And yeah, so this is measurement, and it's capturing these nuances and sort of feeling things out. You'll notice that I didn't like, let's actually trace this girl, and we'll we'll take a comparison. We'll take a comparison. So let's remove all that. Da, 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 ba. So we'll move her down here, and then we'll have room to put a trace. All right. So let's trace this girl. Um, it's kind of a little bit unfair because I could theoretically um, do things to make it look sillier. But say let's trace like this and like this and like this and like this. Well, and there's like a flick here and here. That's that's a fair trace, right? Yeah, that's a fair trace. And then put this dark zone in here, and then this on there, and then along here. Because I want you to see what I mean by tracing. And if you're a beginner and you're doing a couple traces, like don't even worry about it. Like don't even worry about it. If you're experimenting with how it feels or what it does or what it tells you, just everything is your kind of your choice, your risk, whatever you want to do. So I'm trying here not to like rely on like stroke to describe it too much, because that's one of the things that you actually lose in tracing. Let's actually add these like little interesting pipe folds. Yeah, why not? You notice they're actually like cylinders. This is a little teaching thing. Like see how they're like little cylinders, and you can just render them like little cylinders too. Mm-mm-mm-mm. Like pipe folds are like, oh, they're nice. Nice little clothing folds. They're like very easy. I'm getting tired of tracing this. uh, you are using actual force when you're tracing this, but it's kind of a useless application. So it's like, oh, I'm wasting my energy here. Oh God, why? Why am I just doing this tedious task? I know that's how everybody's gonna feel anyway when they're drawing. Like when you're frustrated and you're not feeling it yet. Oh God, I did stroke stuff there. Don't do stroke stuff. Fine. Terra's minor, Terra's minor, Terra's minor, Terra's minor, Terra's minor, Terra's minor. Alright, whatever. It's like a thing patched, yeah, whatever. And there's like a seam that comes down, whatever. And a thing here. Whoa! What? And oh my, so terrible. Oh God, I didn't realize how boring it would be to trace. This is agony. This is legit agony right here. Okay. It feels like it's corrupting me on the inside. No, I'm just joking. Oh God. It's so Like I just want to like use strokes. But that's just my confidence speaking to me, going like, hey, what are you doing? Just do this, do this, do this, do this. This thing would be easy to do right now. Just do it. Just do it. I'm like, no, I can't. I've got to trace. It's like, oh, but I don't want to trace. All right. So I've traced it. Let's actually trace some of these shadow forms too. Just to extend my agony. All right. And trace this shadow form, whatever. Mm, mm, mm. I'm probably putting in the wrong shadow forms. Whatever, who cares? There we go. I don't know. Now I'm definitely going to get in the territory of just needing to do strokes, so I'll stop that. And then here we go for the reveal of how silly traces are. Oh. So, you know what? A trace loses its life. It has no, like, it's just all right, let's try and like fix this trace, right? Like, oh, maybe it's, because didn't put like blend on this, but nobody's going to be able to do this that is just tracing. Like, they're not going to be able to do like these fixy things anyway, so whatever. But we'll do some things where we kind of like create like a bit of pizzazz. There we go. Get a bit more of that form. Bump, bump, bump. Look at that hairy form. Wah, wah, wah. This is not tracing, by the way. This is me rendering it. Rendering a bit of the lighting of those forms. And then this. Here. Mm-mm. So I am actually using stroke and form and that sort of stuff. Bop, bop, bop. Mm, mm, bop, bop, bop. But some things are just too awkward to shift. Like that hair, and maybe that hair is like a thing that you could do actual measurement on and get some interesting forms happening there. So rather than my simplification. So maybe there's a point there. But you're just capturing in her flaws. Like the boxiness of her upper torso, the sort of more flatness of this. I mean, there's also chances to like hint at things that like maybe we do want a little bit of boxiness there coming out. Maybe in this shape we do want like a shape language that does this thing, that goes across like that and darkens and whips down. Maybe we do want something that has like a ridge and a dark aspect in here. Sorry if you can hear the people from the street there. They seem quite excited. This is kind of cool. And, you apply the same logic or the same sort of approach in a way that's more sketchy and chill. And it's just going to be a million times more natural, flowy, energetic. It's just so much nicer. Like you just use stroke, you use form, you just kind of feel those things out, and it's just gonna feel like better. But if you do um, copy stuff, what tends to happen from that is you'll notice that even as I copied closer from this one, which was a trace, if I copied from this one and then applied it to this one, it still looks um, awkwardly rendered for the stage of the drawing it's at. So you don't really want to have that over rendered quality in that line accuracy. That's something you want to be choosing with your design and your choice as you go. It's not something you want like that. So you want to be making choices and decisions. The more choices and decisions you make, the more flair and sweep and rhythm and all these things you can put into it. So, even the clothing folds, you can say, oh, I want some pipe folds that really represent and really push this idea here of like this curve, and maybe like those ones will like be a spiral fold, and maybe this will sort of be like these kind of folds, like pushing in and around like this, so that these ones, they come through and around here, and maybe there's like something, I don't know. So you can play with things more if you understand the actual way that you want to measure it and the way that you want to create it. But if you're just over relying on reference, um, you're going to have like a struggle creating the design element ideas that are going to change and shape the form, that are going to be like so much fun. They're going to be so enjoyable and nice and lovely. And like even here up at the hand, like if you think about it as like a this stroke, it kind of becomes like way more flair, way more interesting, while this is a clump. So that stroke choice of something, and like maybe across here you could put something that is emphasizing this kind of part of the curve. Like she has a pocket there, but you could make something that like emphasizes that pocket more, maybe. Oh, I hate that. Whatever. Um, but yeah, my point is just that this better than this, because you still got the stray cats and dogs problem, but now you're dependent on the reference to fix it. While with this, you can fix it any way you want. It's malleable, changeable, shiftable. This is completely rigid. Like it is so rigid. Actually, let's talk about a concept here, a super important concept. I'm going to do it in a new video, actually. We're going to talk about interpretive resistance. All right. All right. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in, and I hope you enjoyed and learned a little bit more about measurement. And catch me in the next vid. All right, cool.